Hi guys, welcome back to Two Blondes and A Brokerage. Today we're going to do something kind of fun. Obviously, in any profession, there are things that we do really well and things that we don't do very well. So we're going to give our most kind of embarrassing story in real estate. So Audrey, why don't you kick us off?
Oh gosh. So I feel like everything embarrassing to you happens in your first year of real estate. Like
Always.
anything that can happen will, and that was definitely the case for me as well. I was driving with a client, and it's funny because I feel like I've maybe had like one or two clients in my car ever. Usually people want to like follow you or like meet you there or whatever. Well, this particular client didn't have a car. She always light railed to and from work. So I would just pick her up and then show her homes or whatever. And we're driving through this neighborhood. We're looking at houses. We're exploring different parts of Denver. And I'm not like super familiar. It's my first year. It's my first client, actually. It was my very first client. And I wasn't familiar with the area. So we're like looking, talking, whatever. And all of a sudden I'm getting pulled over. And I'm like, I'm getting pulled over, and she's like, what's happening? I'm like, I don't know. And so the officer comes over and he comes up, like does a stupid officer thing. He's like, do you know why I pulled you over today? And I'm like, actually, I can say with confidence, I do not know why you pulled me over. I was like not speeding it. We're going slow through the neighborhood or whatever. And he's like, well, you just ran through that stop sign back there. Like I just completely blew through it. I wasn't even looking, didn't see it, didn't have any idea, completely just hauled ass right through it. Didn't even see it. So I'm like laughing and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm like mortified because my client is with me and I just like blew through a stop sign. I'm about to get a ticket. And I was like, but while you're here, we were just talking about like crime. And we're curious, like how this area is on crime. And so he's like talking to us about it and like whatever. He ended up leaving me off, like letting me off, which was great. But it was funny, and I'll never forget this because he was like, we compare, because at the time we were at our Parker office. He's like, we compare all cities like as far as crime to Parker, like how it is in comparison to Parker. And I was like, well, that's so interesting because I just came from Parker. So he ended up being a really nice guy, but absolutely mortifying to get pulled over with a client in the car, your first ever client in your first year of real estate. I was like, great. What else could possibly happen with this?
Well, I mean, did she buy with you?
She did. She did. Not in that area, though. So,
We
yeah,
picked a different area.
not any of those houses. That was like, I actually remember, I can't remember if it was that day or not, but we were looking at houses in Denver like that. And we're in this one house that is, it was truly probably the most terrifying house I've ever been in as far as like just complete shithole. And I remember the doors had locks on the outside of them, like high locks. And I was like, I don't, this is not feeling like it to me.
No.
Like there's maybe like not great things that have happened in this. I just like had a horrible, like some houses just have like a really bad vibe.
Yeah.
This one had a really bad vibe. And then it's like, then when we were saying that, and she's like, I was like, I'm not even going to go in the basement of this house. Like, I don't need to. I'm like, you're not going to buy this house. I've seen enough in this house. But I can't remember if it was the same day I got pulled over or not. Probably, honestly.
That is epic. And that's when you had your little black Mazda, huh?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Must have had the Mazda at that point. Yeah.
I remember that car.
Me too.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Mine was not more or less like it's embarrassing because it was my first real estate like lesson. It wasn't like a funny like, oh my God, I got pulled over, or I locked the keys in when we got to leave. Like mine was legit embarrassing because it affected everything. But long story short, these were really good friends of ours. They were in our wedding way before we ever got married. They, wanted to buy their first house. And so it ended up being my first double-ended deal. So it wasn't my first transaction at all, but it was my first where I was the transaction broker. Met these, I had this listing come on, and the first thing I thought when they had me in on this listing appointment was, if I get this, I have the perfect buyers. Sure enough, everything worked out, right? So I get my sellers under contract on their, new house in Elizabeth. Our friends are ready to buy this house. We go for a final walkthrough, the whole 9 yards. super excited. I'm all big, on my closing gift. So I'm like getting last minute things. I'm like all excited. We go to closing the next day. Seller signed the night before. My buyers, we meet at 9:00. We sign. They're getting their moving truck. Everything's good to go. So this was like a Thursday. Friday comes around. Saturday morning, I'll never forget, I was having coffee out on our front porch and I get a call from my buyer and they're like, hey, Em. I'm like, hey, how's first night? Super exciting. And he's like, yeah, so weren't our appliances stainless steel? And I was like, yeah, like, cool. He's like, so they're all white and our refrigerator is leaking all over our floor. And I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Oh
He's
God.
like, I'm looking back at the pictures from when you sent it to us because it's your listing and it shows that they're stainless steel. And I'm like, yeah, they are stainless steel. So I start to panic, right? And I call my sellers and they won't answer the phone. Mind you, I have not closed on their buy side yet. They're renting for like another 2 weeks. So I still have to deal with these people. So I'm starting to think white refrigerator, white appliances. Oh, wait, there was a white refrigerator in the garage. Why would he be calling me about the garage fridge? So he puts me on FaceTime, and sure enough, my sellers had gone in after we did our walkthrough and switched out all of the appliances so that they could take
Oh
those
my
appliances to
God.
their new house. Which again, mind you, their new home had brand new stainless steel appliances. It was an older home, but the sellers on that one had put in. So I'm sitting there like freaking out because I'm like, this is not my fault. But I was so embarrassed because my big rule of thumb was always do a walkthrough day of closing. Don't
Yeah.
go, I don't even care if it's vacant.
Yeah.
Go right before you go to closing because people do crazy things. So, long story short, I got into almost a lawsuit with my sellers because I was like, I have proof. They said that they weren't going to close with me, that I didn't need my commission because I was like making them out to be these bad guys. And it was just like such an embarrassing moment because I'm like, these are my friends. These
Yeah.
are like, these are appliances. These are not cheap to replace. Like, I was thinking I'm going to have to give like my entire commission to these people because this was technically, and even though it wasn't my fault, but it was like that embarrassing moment of like, holy cow, like things like this really do happen. Because I was trying to think of like a funny story that was embarrassing, but I like didn't have. I mean, I've locked a key in and had to call showing time and be like, well, I'm gonna have to call the listing agent because I can't get a hold of him and I locked the keys. But that was just like such a gut wrenching, embarrassing feeling, and I was like, I will never. And to this day, I have never, ever, ever done a final walkthrough unless it was the day before, or I'm sorry, the day of, because I will never live through that like embarrassment and feeling like it was and even though my clients knew that it wasn't my fault, it still was like,
Yeah.
a brand new home, they're in their like 22 and 23 years old. They don't have a ton of money. They've rented an apartment for God knows how long. And
This is
so
their first experience.
so long story short, it was not pretty. But
It's funny
thankfully,
because you learn, like, everyone says like best practices, right, in real estate. And everyone's always like, but why? But why? And then as you practice real estate, you find out the hard way usually why there are best practices and why they are what they are, because people will do crazy shit like that. And then you're
there
like,
are no
oh,
morals.
this is
Yeah.
why we do this. Because bad things can happen.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Travis was telling me, speaking of like lock and keys, a lot of, and I know I've heard this story so many times, realtors that take the key with them,
Yes.
like they lock up, put the key in their pocket or whatever they do. They're talking to their client. Don't put it back in the lockbox. Travis was telling me that he showed one and it was like an hour and 15 minutes away. And he got all the way back before he got the call from showing time that he had taken the key and there was someone else there to view the home.
Look at it.
Yeah, yeah. So he had done that. Bridget dropped a key through the floorboards once. I've
I
heard
remember.
that 100 times. Like people that are like, because those lock boxes are so hard, and then you're holding the key, fumbling with the lockbox, and then the key just falls through. And the deck's always on a deck with like the planks are too far apart or whatever.
Yep.
Key just manages to just find that one little spot, slip right through. Yeah, I feel like that's everyone has one of those stories.
I have had a cat get out of a door, and
Oh
I
yeah,
straight up, but it ended up being okay. Like there wasn't any kind of like showing notes or, like we're really good about putting signs like on a glass window that's like, please make sure this is shut. But it got out
Yeah.
and I was like, I just ruined like this whole family's life because I let their kid.
Cats
And I
are the
immediately called.
worst.
And I was like, and she goes, it's okay. It's an indoor outdoor cat. But I was like, I would have felt horrible if
So bad. That's like
happened.
one of my biggest fears. I did have a cat. Thankfully, my client bought this townhome, but the cat was supposed to be in the basement, I think, or not in the whatever it was, and it snuck by me. This cat, like literally, hauled ass past me,
Yeah.
and then it was like hissing at me and stuff. And I was like, I'm not licensed for this. I'm like, I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing here. And yeah, so the cats will get you for sure. Pets in general. I always have like, God forbid someone's dog runs away
I
or
know.
oh God.
I
I just
know.
can't imagine.
It's hard. But we'll have to do another segment on our scariest because I've got a good one. But we'll have
Oh,
to do
do you?
a segment on like scariest encounter as a realtor or with
Okay.
whichever.
Oh, I actually have a good one for that too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
we'll have to do that on the next one. So you'll have to make sure you stay tuned for our next episode because we've got all the juicy real estate drama these days. But make sure that you like our podcast, subscribe, comment, find us on YouTube. And we look forward to hearing from you guys soon.
we'll see you next time.